The boardroom falls silent as Richard slides the photo across the table. Tessa with the building manager and his daughter, looking like a family. "You're playing house with the help," he says coldly. "It makes you look soft." Tessa's hands shake. Her career, her reputation, her entire world threatens to collapse. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. Tessa Monroe hadn't become the youngest CEO of Monroe Tech by letting her focus waver. At 32, she'd built her software company from a garage startup to a $70 million enterprise through sheer determination and an almost obsessive attention to detail. She noticed patterns others missed, calculated risks with surgical precision, and maintained absolute control over every aspect of her professional life, which made it all the more mortifying that she couldn't stop staring at the new building manager's body. It had been 3 weeks since Nolan Harris started working in her office complex, and Tessa found herself inventing reasons to walk past the maintenance corridor. She'd pretend to check the temperature controls, inspect the emergency exits, or review the recycling protocols. Anything that might give her another glimpse of him. This morning, she told herself she was simply ensuring the renovations on the 14th floor were proceeding on schedule. That's what a responsible CEO would do. That's what she'd tell anyone who asked. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped into the construction zone, her Louboutins clicking against the temporary plywood flooring. The space smelled of fresh paint and sawdust, and somewhere in the distance, a radio played old R&B. Then she saw him. Nolan was crouched near the far wall, examining something at the baseboard. He wore fitted charcoal work pants that hugged his thighs and a black compression shirt that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. His shoulders were impossibly broad, his arms corded with muscle that flexed as he shifted his weight. Dark brown skin gleamed under the construction lights, and when he stood to his full height, easily 6'3", Tessa felt something warm unfurl low in her belly. She should leave. She should turn around and go back to her office where she belonged, where she could pretend to focus on quarterly projections instead of the way his shirt stretched across his chest. But she didn't move. Nolan pulled a measuring tape from his belt, extending it along the wall. The motion made his bicep bunch and release, and Tessa's mouth went dry. He had the kind of body that came from actual physical labor, not designer gym memberships and personal trainers. Real strength, the kind that could lift her, hold her, pin her against a wall if she asked him to. Heat flooded her cheeks. Where had that thought come from? She cleared her throat, trying to sound professional, authoritative, like the CEO she was supposed to be. "How's the progress?" Nolan turned, and for a moment, Tessa forgot how to breathe. He had the most beautiful face she'd ever seen, strong jaw, high cheekbones, full lips that curved into an easy smile. But it was his eyes that undid her. Deep brown, warm and intelligent, with tiny lines at the corners that suggested he laughed often. When those eyes met hers, something electric passed between them. "Ms. Monroe." His voice was deep, smooth like aged whiskey. "Didn't expect to see you up here. Everything's on schedule. Should be wrapped up by Friday." "Good, that's good." She sounded like an idiot. She ran a $70 million company, and she couldn't string together a coherent sentence because a handsome man was looking at her. Nolan's smile widened slightly, like he knew exactly what effect he was having on her. "Was there something specific you needed to check?" "Yes, your body. Every inch of it, preferably with my hands." "Just doing my rounds," she managed, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. The motion felt awkward, girlish. She hated it. "Well, feel free to look around. I'll be here if you have any questions." He turned back to his work, dismissing her politely. Tessa should have left then. Instead, she found herself walking deeper into the construction zone, pretending to inspect things she knew nothing about. She was acutely aware of Nolan's presence behind her, could feel his gaze on her back. Or maybe she was imagining it. Maybe he hadn't given her a second thought. She bent to examine an electrical outlet. Why, she had no idea, and heard a sharp intake of breath behind her. When she straightened and turned, she caught Nolan looking away quickly, his jaw tight. Had he been staring at her? The thought sent a thrill through her body that she had no business feeling. "The electrical work looks good," she said, though she had no idea what she was looking at. "Thanks." His voice sounded strained. "My crew's the best." An awkward silence stretched between them. Tessa knew she should leave, should stop making a fool of herself, but her feet wouldn't cooperate. "You have any kids?" The question tumbled out before she could stop it. Immediately, she wanted to take it back. What was wrong with her? But Nolan's expression softened, his whole demeanor changing. "Yeah, a daughter, Maya. She's 7. "That's a great age," Tessa said, and she meant it. "I bet she keeps you busy." "Every single day." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. "She's obsessed with dinosaurs right now. I can name every species from the Cretaceous period because she quizzes me every morning at breakfast." Tessa laughed, a real laugh that surprised her. "That sounds exhausting and wonderful." "It is." Nolan's eyes crinkled at the corners. "You have kids?" "No, I'm married to my work, apparently." The bitterness in her voice caught her off guard. Nolan studied her for a moment, something thoughtful in his expression. "That must get lonely?" The observation was too accurate, too penetrating. Tessa felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she didn't like. She straightened her shoulders, slipping back into her CEO armor. "I should get back to my office. Lots to do." "Of course." Nolan nodded, professional again. "I'll send you the updated timeline by end of day." "Perfect. Thank you." She walked back to the elevator with as much dignity as she could muster, feeling his eyes on her the entire way. Only when the doors closed did she let herself slump against the wall, her heart racing. What was happening to her? She didn't do this. She didn't lose her composure over attractive men. She'd dated investment bankers and tech executives, sophisticated, successful men who understood her world. She'd never once felt this kind of raw, visceral attraction that made her forget her own name. But there was something about Nolan, something beyond his devastating looks. The way he talked about his daughter, the warmth in his eyes, the quiet confidence in how he carried himself. He seemed comfortable in his skin in a way that most people never achieved. And God help her, she wanted him. The next 2 days were torture. Tessa tried to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting back to Nolan. She'd find herself staring at her computer screen, remembering the way his muscles moved under that compression shirt, imagining what his skin would feel like under her hands. She was losing her mind. On Wednesday, she had a legitimate reason to go to the 14th floor. She needed to approve the color samples for the new conference room. She told herself it was purely professional as she stepped off the elevator, but her racing pulse betrayed her. Nolan was there, talking to one of his crew members. Today, he wore a navy blue t-shirt that somehow made his shoulders look even broader, and those same fitted work pants that should be illegal. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Surprise, pleasure, maybe something darker. "Ms. Monroe, back again?" "Color samples," she said, holding up the folder like evidence. "For the conference room." "Right, they're set up over here." He led her to the far corner where fabric swatches and paint chips were arranged on a makeshift table. Tessa forced herself to look at the samples, to pretend she cared about the difference between Whisper Gray and Misty Morning. But she was hyper-aware of Nolan standing beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something clean and masculine with a hint of cedar. "What do you think?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Which color works better with the space?" Nolan leaned in to study the samples, and his arm brushed against hers. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent electricity shooting through her entire body. She sucked in a breath, hoping he didn't notice. He noticed. When she glanced up, Nolan was looking at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. His jaw was tight, his eyes dark and unreadable. "The gray," he said, his voice lower than before. "Definitely the gray." "Okay." She could barely hear her own voice over the pounding of her heart. "Gray it is?" Neither of them moved. They stood there, inches apart, the air between them charged with something dangerous. Tessa's gaze dropped to his mouth, wondering what it would feel like against hers. Would he kiss soft and slow, or hard and demanding? Would his hands be gentle or rough? "Ms. Monroe?" "Tessa. Please call me Tessa." His eyes searched her face. "Tessa, I should probably tell you something." Her breath caught. "What?" "I noticed you, that first day you came up here, and every day since." His honesty was disarming. "I notice when you walk by the maintenance office. I notice when you take the long route past my supply closet. And I notice when you look at me the way you're looking at me right now." Humiliation and arousal warred in her chest. "I don't lie." His voice was gentle but firm. "We're both adults. Let's be honest." Tessa's hands were shaking. She'd never been called out like this, never been so thoroughly seen. Part of her wanted to run, to retreat into her office and never come out. But a bigger part, the part that was tired of being in control all the time, wanted to hear what he'd say next. "Okay," she whispered. "I look at you. I can't seem to help it." Nolan's expression softened. "And what do you see when you look at me?" Everything. She saw everything. His strength, his kindness, the intelligence in his eyes, the way he loved his daughter. But most of all, she saw a man who made her feel things she'd thought she was too busy, too focused, too controlled to feel. "I see someone who makes me forget how to think," she admitted. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Nolan shook his head slowly, and Tessa's heart sank. "This is a bad idea," he said. "I know." "You're the CEO. I work for the building." "I know." "I have a daughter to think about. I can't afford to complicate my life." "I know." Tessa felt tears prickling behind her eyes, which was ridiculous. She never cried. "I'm sorry. I'll stop coming up here. I'll be professional." She turned to leave, but Nolan's hand shot out, catching her wrist. His grip was firm but gentle, his thumb pressing against her pulse point. "I didn't say I didn't want to," he said quietly. Tessa froze. When she looked back at him, the heat in his eyes nearly buckled her knees. "I just said it was a bad idea." His thumb traced a slow circle on the inside of her wrist. "That doesn't mean I don't think about you. That doesn't mean I haven't imagined what it would be like to kiss you, to touch you, to hear you say my name when I—" He cut himself off, releasing her wrist and stepping back. "But I have to be smart. Maya comes first, always." "Of course she does." Tessa's skin burned where he'd touched her. "That's what makes you a good father." "So we agree." "This can't happen." "Right? It can't." They stood there in the half-finished conference room, both knowing they were lying to themselves. The rest of the week passed in a blur of tension and stolen glances. Every time Tessa saw Nolan in the building, the air between them crackled with unspoken want. She'd catch him looking at her in the lobby, or he'd appear in her peripheral vision when she was getting coffee, and every encounter left her more wound up than the last. On Friday evening, most of the building had cleared out for the weekend. Tessa was still in her office, staring at spreadsheets she couldn't focus on, when her desk phone rang. "Ms. Monroe, it's Nolan from Building Maintenance." as if she needed the clarification, as if his voice didn't make her entire body come alive. "Yes, what can I do for you?" "The renovations are finished on 14. I wanted to do a final walkthrough with you before we sign off. Make sure everything meets your standards." It was after 7 on a Friday night. The building was nearly empty. This was either completely innocent or completely not innocent. "I'll be right up," she said. Her hand shook as she touched up her lipstick in the bathroom mirror. She looked flushed, her green eyes too bright, her blonde hair slightly mussed from running her fingers through it all day. She looked like a woman on the edge of making a very bad decision. She looked like she didn't care. The 14th floor was silent when she arrived. The construction equipment had been cleared away, the space transformed into a sleek, modern conference area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was beautiful, exactly what she'd envisioned. Nolan stood by the windows, silhouetted against the city lights. He'd changed out of his work clothes into dark jeans and a fitted black sweater that made him look less like a building manager and more like something out of a fantasy. When he turned to face her, the intensity in his expression made her breath catch. "It's perfect," she said, gesturing to the space. "Your team did amazing work. Come see the finishes up close?" His voice was different, lower, edged with something that made her pulse race. Tessa crossed the room, her heels echoing on the polished floors. Nolan pointed out details, the custom millwork, the integrated technology, the acoustic panels. But she wasn't really listening. She was too aware of how close they were standing, how the space felt intimate despite its size, how they were completely alone. "Tessa!" She turned to find him looking at her with raw hunger that stole her breath. "This is your last chance to walk away," he said. "Because if you stay, if you keep looking at me like that, I won't be able to stop myself." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. She barely knew him. She'd never done anything impulsive in her life. She was the CEO. She had a reputation, responsibilities, a board of directors to answer to. But, God, she was so tired of being responsible. "I don't want to walk away," she whispered. Something shifted in Nolan's expression, something primal and possessive that made heat pool between her thighs. He took a step toward her, then another, backing her against the conference table. "Do you have any idea what you do to me?" His voice was rough, strained. "How hard it's been to keep my hands to myself. Every time you walked past in those tight skirts, every time you bent over, every time you looked at me with those green eyes." "Then don't," she breathed. "Don't keep your hands to yourself." For a moment, he just stared at her, and Tessa wondered if she'd pushed too far. Then his hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing across her lower lip. "You're so damn beautiful," he murmured. "So perfect and pristine in your designer suits. Do you have any idea how much I want to mess you up?" Tessa's knees nearly gave out. No one had ever talked to her like this, like she was something to be devoured rather than admired from a distance. "Then mess me up," she challenged. Nolan's eyes went dark. His hand slid from her jaw to the back of her neck, fingers tangling in her hair. "You sure about this? Because once I start, I won't want to stop." "I'm sure." He pulled her against him in one swift motion, and Tessa gasped at the contact. His body was all hard muscle and heat, overwhelming her senses. She could feel every inch of him pressed against her, including the very obvious evidence of his arousal. "Feel that?" His voice was a growl against her ear. "That's what you do to me. That's what I've been dealing with every time you walk by." Tessa's hands found his chest, fingers splaying across the solid muscle beneath his sweater. She could feel his heart pounding, matching her own frantic rhythm. "I've wanted this," she admitted. "Wanted you? I've never felt like this before." "Like what?" "Out of control." Nolan pulled back just enough to look at her, his hand still tangled in her hair. "That scare you?" terrifies me. Good. His smile was wicked, because I'm about to make it worse. Then his mouth was on hers, and Tessa forgot her own name. The kiss was nothing like she'd expected. It wasn't gentle or exploratory. It was claiming, possessive, absolutely devastating. Nolan kissed like a man who knew exactly what he wanted and wasn't afraid to take it. His tongue swept into her mouth, tasting her, owning her, making her whimper against his lips. She'd been kissed before, plenty of times. But this was different. This was consuming. This was drowning and not caring if she ever came up for air. Her hands fisted in his sweater, pulling him closer, needing more. Nolan's arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her effortlessly onto the conference table. He stepped between her legs, pressing his hips against hers, and Tessa moaned at the pressure. God, the sounds you make, he breathed against her mouth. His hands slid up her thighs, pushing her skirt higher. I want to hear all of them, every single one. Tessa's head fell back as his lips trailed down her throat, teeth grazing her pulse point. His hands were everywhere, her thighs, her waist, sliding up her ribs to cup her breasts through her silk blouse. She arched into his touch, desperate for more. Please, she gasped. Please what? His thumb brushed across her nipple, making her shudder. Tell me what you want, Tessa. I don't know. Everything. You? Nolan's laugh was low and dark. You're going to have to be more specific than that. Beautiful. Because there are about 100 things I want to do to you right now, and I need to know which ones you can handle. His words made her dizzy with want. This confident, commanding version of him was everything she'd fantasized about, and more. Touch me, she begged. Please, just touch me. His hand stilled on her body, and when she looked at him, his expression was fierce with barely controlled desire. Not here. Not like this. He pulled back slightly, and Tessa wanted to cry at the loss of contact. You deserve better than a conference table. I don't care. I do. He cupped her face, his touch gentle, despite the hunger in his eyes. When I have you, Tessa, and I will have you, it's going to be somewhere I can take my time, somewhere I can do all the things I've been dreaming about, somewhere you can be as loud as you want without worrying about security cameras or janitors. Security cameras. Oh, God, she hadn't even thought about that. Tessa glanced up at the ceiling, her face burning. Don't worry, Nolan said, following her gaze. They're not installed yet, but they will be by Monday. He helped her off the table, his hand steadying her when her legs wobbled. Tessa tried to smooth down her skirt, acutely aware of how disheveled she must look, hair mussed, lipstick smeared, breathing hard. This is crazy, she said. We barely know each other. I know. Nolan tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture unexpectedly tender. But I want to know you. I want to know everything about you, Tessa Monroe. Not just your body, though God knows I want that too. But what makes you laugh? What keeps you up at night? What dreams you have that have nothing to do with building a company? His words undid her more than his kiss had. No one had ever been interested in that version of her, the version that existed outside of boardrooms and profit margins. I'm not sure I remember who that person is, she admitted quietly. Then, let me help you find out. He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, so different from the consuming kiss they'd shared moments before. Have dinner with me tomorrow, just the two of us. No conference rooms, no security cameras, just a date. What about your daughter? She has a sleepover tomorrow night. I'm a free man until Sunday morning. His smile was warm. Say yes, Tessa. She should say no, should pull back before this went any further, before feelings got involved, before she got hurt. But when she looked into his eyes and saw the genuine care there alongside the desire, She couldn't make herself lie. "Yes," she whispered. Nolan's answering smile was brilliant. "Good. I'll pick you up at 7. You don't know where I live." "I'll find out." He winked at her. "I'm very resourceful." They stood there for another moment, neither wanting to break the spell. Finally, Nolan stepped back, putting proper distance between them. "I should go," he said, "before I change my mind about taking things slow." "Right. Yes, good idea." They walked to the elevator together in silence, the air still charged between them. When the doors opened, Nolan held them, letting her step in first. "Tessa?" She turned to look at him. "Wear that black dress," he said. "The one I've seen you wear to evening meetings. The one that's been driving me insane for 3 weeks." The doors closed on his wicked smile, leaving Tessa alone with her racing heart and the most intense anticipation she'd ever felt. She was in so much trouble. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Tessa spent all day in a state of nervous anticipation, trying on outfits and changing her mind a dozen times. She settled on the black dress he'd mentioned, fitted, sophisticated, with a neckline that hinted without revealing too much. She paired it with simple jewelry and her hair down, wavy and loose. At exactly 7, her doorbell rang. Nolan stood in her doorway, looking devastating in dark slacks and a charcoal button-down that made his eyes look even richer. He held a single sunflower, not a dozen roses like every other man who'd tried to impress her, but one perfect bloom that made her smile. "Sunflowers are my favorite," she said. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess." His eyes traveled down her body slowly, appreciatively. "You look incredible." "So do you." He offered his arm and she took it, feeling like she was stepping into something that would change her life forever. The restaurant he'd chosen was perfect, intimate without being pretentious, upscale without being stuffy. They settled into a corner booth, and Tessa realized she had no idea how to do this, how to be on an actual date instead of a business dinner, how to be herself instead of the CEO everyone expected her to be. "You look nervous," Nolan observed. "I am," she admitted. "I don't do this much, dating, I mean." "Why not?" "I'm always working, and most men are either intimidated by my success or only interested in my money and connections." Nolan's expression turned serious. "I'm not intimidated, Tessa, and I don't give a damn about your money." "Then what are you interested in?" "You, the real you." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Tell me something nobody knows. Something you don't put in interviews or on LinkedIn." Tessa thought for a moment. "I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was little. I loved animals more than anything. But my parents pushed me toward business, said it was more practical, more prestigious. And somewhere along the way, I forgot about the little girl who just wanted to help rescue dogs." Nolan's thumb traced circles on her palm. "It's not too late, you know. You could volunteer at a shelter, foster animals. You don't have to choose between success and the things that make you happy." "When did you get so wise?" "When I became a single dad." His expression softened. "Maya taught me that life's too short to ignore the things that matter, that sometimes the smallest moments are the ones that count most." "Tell me about her," Tessa said. "Tell me everything." And he did. He told her about Maya's obsession with dinosaurs, her hatred of broccoli, her dream of becoming a paleontologist astronaut. He told her about bedtime stories and tea parties, about the terror of raising a daughter alone, about the fierce love that consumed him every time he looked at her. "Her mom left when she was 2, he said quietly. Said she wasn't ready to be a mother, that she needed to find herself. I was angry for a long time, but now I'm just grateful that Maya has me, and I have her. She's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one." He squeezed her hand. "Now your turn. What's the hardest part of being CEO? Tessa thought about deflecting, giving him the polished answer she gave journalists. But something about Nolan made her want to be honest. The loneliness, she said. Everyone sees me as the boss. No one sees me as just Tessa. I go home to an empty penthouse every night, eat takeout at my desk, and wonder if this is really all there is. It doesn't have to be. Doesn't it? I worked so hard to get here, I can't just walk away from it all. I'm not asking you to. Nolan's eyes held hers. But maybe you could make room for something more, someone more. Like you? Like me? Tessa's heart pounded. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brilliant and driven and strong. I know you're lonely and hiding behind your success. I know you pretend not to care what people think, but you care deeply about everything. I know that underneath that CEO armor, you're soft and warm and desperately craving connection. He leaned forward. And I know that when I kiss you, you melt. That when I touch you, you come alive. That's enough for me to want more. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she could do was feel the weight of his gaze, the warmth of his hand, the absolute certainty in his voice. I'm scared, she whispered. Good. So am I. He smiled. Let's be scared together. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of conversation and laughter. Nolan made her smile more in 2 hours than she had in months. He challenged her opinions, called her out when she slipped into CEO speak, and looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the world. By the time they left the restaurant, Tessa felt drunk. On possibility. They walked slowly back to his car, neither wanting the evening to end. Come home with me, Nolan said when they reached her building. It wasn't a demand or a request, just an offering, a choice she could make freely. Tessa knew she should say no, should thank him for dinner and go upstairs alone to her empty penthouse, should protect herself before she fell any harder. But she was so tired of being careful. Okay, she said. Nolan's apartment was the opposite of her sterile penthouse. It was warm, lived in, filled with evidence of a life fully lived. Maya's artwork on the fridge, dinosaur toys scattered around, photos of father and daughter covering every surface. It smelled like home in a way Tessa's place never had. Want something to drink? Nolan asked, shrugging off his jacket. No? Tessa set her purse down. I want you to kiss me again, like you did in the conference room, like you meant it. Nolan crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her against him. Oh, I meant it, beautiful, every second of it. This time, when he kissed her, it was slower, deeper, more thorough. He took his time exploring her mouth, his hands sliding into her hair, tilting her head to deepen the angle. Tessa wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing herself against him, desperate to get closer. His hands moved to her waist, then lower, cupping her backside and pulling her hips flush against his. She could feel how much he wanted her, hard and demanding against her stomach. The knowledge made her bold. She rolled her hips experimentally, and Nolan groaned into her mouth. Bedroom, he muttered against her lips. Now. He lifted her easily, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her down the hall. Tessa had a vague impression of a large bed, soft lighting, before Nolan lowered her onto the mattress and covered her body with his. The weight of him was perfect, grounding her even as she felt like she might float away. His mouth found hers again, kissing her until she was breathless, until she couldn't remember why this was supposed to be a bad idea. His hand slid up her thighs, pushing her dress higher. Tell me if you want me to stop, he murmured against her throat. Tell me if this is too fast. Don't stop, she gasped. Don't you dare stop. Nolan's answering smile against her skin was pure satisfaction. His fingers traced the edge of her underwear, teasing, making her squirm beneath him. You're so responsive, he murmured. So perfect. Do you have any idea how long I've wanted this? How many nights I've lain in this bed thinking about you? Show me, Tessa begged. Show me everything. And finally, blessedly, he did. His fingers slipped beneath the fabric, finding her slick and ready, and Tessa's back arched off the bed. The sensation was overwhelming, perfect, exactly what she needed, and more than she could handle all at once. "That's it," Nolan encouraged, his voice rough with desire. "Let me hear you. Beautiful. No one here but us?" Tessa couldn't have stayed quiet if she'd wanted to. Every touch pulled sounds from her throat she'd never made before, gasps and whimpers and desperate pleas for more. Nolan seemed to catalog each one, learning what made her moan, what made her shudder, what made her say his name like a prayer and a plea now. Hours later, Tessa lay tangled in Nolan's sheets, her body still humming with satisfaction. The moonlight filtered through his bedroom window, casting silver shadows across his dark skin. He was propped up on one elbow, tracing lazy patterns across her bare shoulder, and she'd never felt more content in her entire life. "What are you thinking about?" Nolan asked, his voice still rough from the sounds he'd made earlier. "That I should have walked into that construction zone weeks ago," Tessa admitted, turning to face him. "That I wasted 3 weeks being professional when I could have been doing this." Nolan's laugh was warm and rich. "We needed those 3 weeks. We needed to build something more than just physical attraction." "And have we? Built something more?" The question came out smaller than she'd intended, vulnerable in a way that scared her. Nolan cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Tessa, I don't do casual. Not anymore. Not with Maya in my life. If I'm here with you like this, it's because I want more than one night." Her heart stuttered. "What if I'm terrible at relationships? What if I'm too focused on work, too controlling, too much?" "Then we'll figure it out together." He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "But you need to stop thinking of yourself as too much. You're not too much, beautiful. You're exactly right." Tessa felt tears prick her eyes, which was ridiculous. She never cried. But something about the certainty in his voice, the way he looked at her like she was something precious, undid every defense she'd built. "I want to meet her," she said suddenly. "Maya, I want to meet your daughter." Nolan's expression shifted, something tender and almost awed crossing his features. "You sure about that? Meeting Maya means this is real. It means you're in my life, part of our lives." "I'm sure." And she was, terrifyingly, absolutely sure. "Okay," Nolan smiled, that brilliant smile that made her stomach flip. "She's going to love you. Fair warning, though, she'll probably quiz you about dinosaurs within 5 minutes of meeting you." "I'll study up." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in years, Tessa slept through the night without waking up to check her phone or worry about work. She woke to the smell of coffee and pancakes and the sound of a child's laughter drifting from the kitchen. Panic seized her chest. Maya was home. Maya was here, and Tessa was naked in Nolan's bed, and this was happening too fast, way too fast. Nolan appeared in the doorway, holding a mug of coffee and one of his t-shirts. "Good morning. Thought you might need these." "She's home early." Tessa sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. Her friend got sick, so the sleepover ended early. "But it's okay." He set the coffee on the nightstand and handed her the shirt. "You don't have to meet her today if you're not ready. I can make an excuse." Tessa thought about it for a moment, about taking the easy way out. But then she thought about Nolan's words from last night, about being exactly right instead of too much, about not running from things that scared her. "No," she said, pulling on his shirt. It smelled like him, cedar and something warm. "I want to meet her." Nolan's smile was everything. "Come on then, but prepare yourself. She's a hurricane, in 7-year-old form. Maya Harris was indeed a hurricane. She had her father's warm brown eyes and an explosion of curly hair pulled into 2 puffballs on either side of her head. She wore dinosaur pajamas and had syrup on her chin, and when Tessa walked into the kitchen, Maya studied her with the kind of intense scrutiny usually reserved for museum artifacts. "Hi," Maya said. "Are you my dad's girlfriend?" Tessa froze, looking to Nolan for help, but he just grinned, clearly enjoying her discomfort. "I'm Tessa," she said, sitting down at the kitchen table. "I'm your dad's friend." "Friends don't wear daddy's shirts," Maya observed, matter of fact. "His girlfriends do." Out of the mouths of babes. Tessa felt her face heat, but Maya didn't seem bothered by it. She just took another bite of her pancake and swung her legs under the table. "You're right," Tessa admitted. "I am your dad's girlfriend. Is that okay with you?" Maya considered this seriously. "Do you like dinosaurs?" "I don't know much about them, but I'd love to learn." "What about space? Do you like space?" "I think space is amazing." "Good." Maya nodded, apparently satisfied. "Daddy says I can be a paleontologist astronaut when I grow up. Do you think that's possible?" Tessa glanced at Nolan, who was leaning against the counter, watching them with an expression of pure affection. "I think if anyone can figure out how to be a paleontologist astronaut, it's you." "I like her, Daddy," Maya announced. "She can stay." Nolan laughed, moving to ruffle his daughter's hair. "Good to know you approve, baby girl." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of dinosaur facts, pancake making, and cartoon watching. Tessa found herself relaxing in a way she never had before, sitting on Nolan's couch with Maya curled against her side, explaining the difference between a velociraptor and a Deinonychus with passionate intensity. When Maya finally ran off to her room to get her dinosaur collection, Nolan sat down beside Tessa, pulling her close. "You're a natural with her," he said softly. "She's incredible. You've done an amazing job." "We could do an amazing job," Nolan corrected. "If you want. No pressure, but I meant what I said last night. I want you in my life, Tessa. In our lives." Tessa looked around his small, warm apartment, so different from her cold penthouse. She thought about her empty life, her lonely nights, her obsessive focus on work that had left her feeling hollow. And then she thought about this. Lazy Sunday mornings with pancakes and dinosaur facts, strong arms holding her close, a little girl who'd accepted her with open-hearted generosity. "I want that too," she whispered. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment and discovery. Tessa found herself leaving work earlier, making excuses to her assistant about prior commitments. Those commitments usually involved dinner at Nolan's apartment, or taking Maya to the park, or sneaking stolen moments in Nolan's office when his crew was out on jobs. She learned to braid hair, badly, but Maya was patient with her. She learned the names of every dinosaur in the Mesozoic era. She learned what it felt like to be part of a family, even if it wasn't officially hers yet. And at night, when Maya was asleep, she learned what it meant to be completely undone by someone. Nolan was patient and thorough, taking his time to discover every sensitive spot on her body, every sound he could pull from her throat. He made her feel beautiful and desired and cherished all at once. "You're thinking too much again?" Nolan murmured one night, his hands sliding up her thighs. They were in her penthouse for once, Maya staying with her grandmother for the night. "I can always tell when you're in your head." "I'm just wondering how this happened," Tessa admitted. "How you became everything so quickly." "Maybe because you let yourself feel it instead of analyzing it." His mouth found the sensitive spot behind her ear. "Maybe because you stopped being afraid." "I'm still afraid," she confessed. "Afraid I'll mess this up. Afraid I'm not enough for you and Maya. Afraid that one day you'll realize I'm just a workaholic CEO who doesn't know how to be soft." Nolan pulled back to look at her, his expression fierce. Stop. Stop talking about yourself like that. You are enough, Tessa. More than enough. Maya adores you. I'm falling in love with you. You're not too much and you're not too little. You're exactly what we need. You're falling in love with me? Her voice came out breathless. Yeah. His smile was tender. I am. Probably have been since that first day you walked into the construction zone pretending to check the temperature controls. Tessa laughed, even as tears spilled down her cheeks. I was so obvious, wasn't I? Completely. Nolan kissed away her tears. But I loved it. Loved watching you try to be professional when all you wanted to do was stare at me. I still want to stare at you, she admitted, especially when you're like this. She gestured to his current state, shirtless, his muscles defined in the low lighting, his eyes dark with desire. Nolan's answering smile was wicked. Then stare, beautiful. Stare all you want. And she did. She let herself look at him, really look, at the strength in his shoulders, the power in his arms, the beauty of his dark skin against her pale sheets. She let herself appreciate every inch of him without shame or pretense. Touch it, Nolan said, his voice dropping to that commanding tone that made her shiver. Stop just looking and touch me, Tessa. Her hands trembled as she reached for him, tracing the defined muscles of his abdomen, feeling them contract under her touch. Nolan's breath hitched, his eyes never leaving hers. That's it, he encouraged. Don't hold back. I want your hands on me. Want you to know every part of me. Tessa grew bolder, her exploration more thorough. She mapped the landscape of his body, the ridges of his ribs, the hollow of his throat, the hard planes of his chest. Every touch drew sounds from him that made her feel powerful and desired. When her hand moved lower, Nolan caught her wrist gently. You sure? Because once you start, I won't be able to stay in control. Good, Tessa said, her voice stronger than she felt. I don't want you in control. I want you completely undone, the way you make me. Nolan's answering groan was satisfying beyond measure. You're going to be the death of me, woman. Then die happy. What followed was intense and overwhelming and absolutely perfect. They moved together with an urgency that came from weeks of building tension, from the fear that this somehow wasn't real, from the desperate need to prove to each other that it was. Afterward, Tessa lay sprawled across Nolan's chest, her body deliciously sore, her mind finally quiet. His hand stroked through her hair, gentle and soothing. I love you, she said into the darkness. I know it's fast and probably crazy, but I do. I love you and Maya and this life we're building. Nolan's arms tightened around her. It's not crazy. It's not too fast. It's exactly right. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I love you too, Tessa Monroe. Love everything about you. She fell asleep smiling, more at peace than she'd ever been. But peace, she learned, was often temporary. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks later, when Tessa walked into her Monday morning executive meeting to find her board of directors waiting with grim expressions. Richard Blackwell, her lead investor and biggest pain in her neck, was sitting at the head of the table where she usually sat. Richard, she said carefully, setting down her briefcase. What's going on? We need to talk about your recent behavior, Tessa. His voice was cold, professional. It's come to our attention that you've been leaving work early, declining evening commitments, and generally being less available than usual. Tessa felt ice forming in her stomach. I've been maintaining all my responsibilities and hitting every target. My performance hasn't suffered. It's not just about performance, another board member chimed in. It's about dedication, about sacrifice. You built this company on 80-hour weeks and complete focus. Now you're acting like someone with a 9-to-5 job. I'm acting like someone with a life, Tessa corrected, keeping her voice level despite the anger building in her chest. I'm still doing my job well. Better than well? Are you, though? Richard pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. The Chen deal fell through because you left negotiations early. The Singapore expansion has been delayed because you weren't available for conference calls. You're losing your edge, Tessa. She opened the folder, her heart sinking as she saw the documentation. He was right. She had left the Chen negotiations early because Maya had a school concert. She had missed the Singapore calls because she'd been having dinner with Nolan. These are minor setbacks, she argued, nothing that can't be recovered. Maybe. Richard leaned back in his chair. But we're concerned about the trajectory, about where your priorities are. We need our CEO focused on the company, not on her personal life. My personal life doesn't interfere with my work. Doesn't it? He pulled out his phone, pulling up something that made Tessa's blood run cold. It was a photo of her and Nolan leaving her building together, Maya holding both their hands between them. They were laughing, looking like a family, and someone had captured it. So what? Tessa demanded. I'm dating someone. That's not a crime. You're dating the building manager, Richard corrected. You're playing house with a single father and his kid. It looks unprofessional, Tessa. It makes you look soft. The word soft hit her like a physical blow. All her life, she'd fought against being seen as soft, as less capable because she was a woman. She'd built armor around herself, worked twice as hard, sacrificed everything to prove she deserved her position. And now they were using her relationship, her happiness, against her. Get out, she said quietly. Richard raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Get out of my office, all of you. This meeting is over. Her voice was steel now, cold and commanding. I will run this company how I see fit. I will live my life how I choose. And if any of you have a problem with that, you know where the door is. The board members exchanged glances, clearly not expecting her to push back. Slowly, they filed out, leaving only Richard behind. You're making a mistake, he said. This company is your legacy. Don't throw it away for some working-class romance. My legacy is what I build, Richard, not what I sacrifice. She met his gaze steadily. And I'm not throwing anything away. I'm finally holding on to what matters. When he left, Tessa sank into her chair, her hands shaking. She'd stood up to them, defended her choices, but their words had burrowed under her skin. Was she losing her edge? Was she prioritizing her personal life over the company she'd built from nothing? She thought about calling Nolan, but what would she say? That her board was questioning her judgment because of him? That choosing love was apparently the same as choosing failure? Instead, she buried herself in work. She stayed late that night, and the next, and the one after that. She started taking calls during dinner again, checking her phone constantly, missing Maya's bedtime stories because she was in meetings. Nolan noticed, of course. He always noticed. Talk to me, he said one night after she'd canceled dinner plans for the third time that week. He'd shown up at her office anyway, finding her still at her desk at 9 p.m. What's going on? Nothing, just busy. She didn't look up from her laptop. Tessa. He closed her laptop gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. Don't shut me out. Whatever it is, we can handle it together. And just like that, everything came pouring out. The board meeting, Richard's accusations, her fear that she was losing her edge, her terror that she couldn't have both the company and the family she'd come to love. Nolan listened to all of it, his expression growing darker as she spoke. When she finally finished, he was quiet for a long moment. So they made you feel like choosing us means failing at work, he said finally. Not just that. They're right, Nolan. I have been distracted. The Chen deal did fall through because I left early. I did miss those calls. Because you were building a life, Nolan countered. Because you were choosing to be more than just a CEO. That's not a weakness, Tessa. That's growth. But what if they're right? What if I can't do both? What if trying to have everything means I end up with nothing? Nolan stood up, pulling her out of her chair and into his arms. Listen to me. You are brilliant and capable and strong enough to have both. But only if you stop letting other people define what success looks like. How do I do that? By deciding what matters to you, by setting boundaries, by realizing that being a good CEO doesn't mean sacrificing your humanity. He cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. Maya and I don't want the shell of a woman who works 80-hour weeks and has no life outside her office. We want you, messy and complicated and trying to figure out balance. We want the real you. Tears streamed down Tessa's face. I'm so scared of failing, of letting everyone down. Then fail. Fail spectacularly, but fail while living your life, not while slowly killing yourself to meet someone else's expectations. She kissed him then, desperate and grateful, and still terrified, but feeling less alone. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I need to fix this, she said, not by going back to how things were, but by finding a way forward that works for all of us. Then let's figure it out together. The next morning, Tessa called an emergency board meeting. She walked in with her shoulders back and her head high, carrying a presentation she'd worked on all night. Gentlemen, she said, setting up her laptop, let's talk about the future of Monroe Tech. For the next hour, she laid out her vision, not just for the company's growth, but for its culture. She proposed hiring a chief operating officer to handle day-to-day operations, freeing her to focus on strategy and major deals. She showed them data proving that companies with better work-life balance actually performed better in the long term. She made the business case for being a human being instead of just a CEO. And most importantly, she drew a line in the sand. I will not sacrifice my personal life for this company, she said firmly. Not because I don't care about Monroe Tech, but because I care about it enough to lead by example. We talk about innovation and forward thinking, but we operate like it's still the 1980s. That changes now. Richard started to object, but she cut him off. I'm not asking for permission. This is how I'm running my company. If the board wants to vote me out, that's your right. But you should know that I have majority shares, and I will fight you every step of the way. Or, she paused, letting her gaze sweep across the room. You can trust the woman who built this company from nothing to know what she's doing. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, surprisingly, one of the older board members started clapping. Others joined in, until even Richard was nodding grudgingly. Fine, Richard said, we'll try it your way, but the numbers better not slip. They won't, Tessa promised, because a CEO who's actually living her life makes better decisions than one who's burnt out and miserable. When she left the meeting, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. She'd stood up for herself, for her relationship, for the life she was building. And it felt incredible. She went straight from the office to Nolan's apartment. Maya was at school, so it was just him, looking surprised and pleased to see her in the middle of a workday. Tessa, everything okay? Better than okay. She threw her arms around him. I did it. I set boundaries. I told them I won't choose between work and life anymore. Nolan's smile was brilliant. That's my girl. I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of me too. She pulled back to look at him. And I want to celebrate. Can you get someone to watch Maya tonight? I think that can be arranged. His eyes darkened with interest. What did you have in mind? I want to take you somewhere special. She bit her lip. And I want to ask you something important. That night, Tessa took Nolan to the rooftop restaurant where she'd closed her first major deal years ago. It was expensive and exclusive, the kind of place that usually made her feel powerful and successful. But tonight, with Nolan beside her in his best suit, still not as expensive as what the other diners wore, but fitting him perfectly, she just felt happy. They talked through dinner about everything and nothing. About Maya's upcoming science fair project, about the new COO candidates Tessa was interviewing, about their plans for the summer. Normal couple things that felt extraordinary simply because they were doing them together. When dessert came, Tessa reached across the table and took his hand. "I need to tell you something," she said. Nolan's expression grew concerned. "That sounds serious." "It is, but not in a bad way." She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about what you said, about deciding what matters to me. And I realized something. You matter. Maya matters. This thing we're building together matters more than anything else in my life." "Tessa, let me finish." She squeezed his hand. "I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a few months, but I don't want to waste any more time. Life's too short, and I've already spent too many years alone." She pulled out a small box from her purse, and Nolan's eyes went wide. "Tessa, what are you doing?" "Something crazy, something I would never have had the courage to do before I met you." She opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band. "Nolan Harris, will you marry me?" For a long moment, Nolan just stared at her. Then he started laughing. Not mocking laughter, but pure joy. "You're proposing to me? The woman who 3 months ago couldn't even admit she was staring at me?" "Yes, that same woman, who apparently grew a spine somewhere along the way." Her hands were shaking. "So what do you say? Want to make this official?" Nolan stood up, pulling her out of her chair and into his arms right there in the middle of the fancy restaurant. "Yes, God, yes, I'll marry you, Tessa Monroe." He kissed her then, deep and thorough and completely inappropriate for their surroundings. Tessa didn't care. Let the other diners stare. Let them gossip about the CEO kissing the building manager. She'd found something more valuable than their approval. She'd found home. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Nolan cupped her face. "We need to tell Maya together," he said. "Make sure she's okay with this." "Of course." Tessa slid the ring onto his finger, where it looked absolutely right. "Though something tells me she'll approve." She was right. The next morning, when they sat Maya down to tell her, the little girl's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Does this mean Tessa's going to be my mom?" she asked, bouncing excitedly. Tessa glanced at Nolan, unsure how to answer. He nodded encouragingly. "If you want me to be," Tessa said carefully. "I know I can't replace your birth mother, but I would love to be part of your family, officially." Maya launched herself at Tessa, wrapping her arms around her neck. "I want you to be my mom. You're the best mom ever." Tessa held the little girl close, tears streaming down her face. 6 months ago, she'd been alone in her penthouse, convinced that work was enough, that success meant sacrifice, that she had to choose between having it all and having anything real. But now, with Nolan's arms around both her and Maya, she realized she'd been wrong about everything. Success wasn't sacrifice, it was balance. It wasn't choosing between work and love, it was finding space for both. It wasn't being hard and untouchable. It was being brave enough to be soft. The wedding was small and perfect, just close friends and family in Nolan's sister's backyard. Maya served as flower girl and ring bearer, taking her dual roles very seriously. Tessa wore a simple ivory dress instead of an elaborate gown, and Nolan wore a suit that made him look so handsome she almost couldn't speak her vows. Almost? "I promise to love you even when I'm stressed about work," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise to come home for dinner. I promise to learn the names of all the dinosaurs. I promise to never stop staring at you even when we're old and gray." Nolan's vows made her cry. He promised to support her ambitions, to remind her to take breaks, to make her laugh when she took herself too seriously, to love her exactly as she was, brilliant and driven, and finally letting herself be happy. When the officiant pronounced them married, Nolan pulled her close and whispered in her ear, "Ready to spend forever with a building manager and his dinosaur-obsessed daughter?" "More ready than I've ever been for anything," she whispered back. Their first year of marriage was an adventure in compromise and adjustment. Tessa hired an excellent COO who handled operations while she focused on strategy. She established firm boundaries about work hours and family time. She learned that she could be an exceptional CEO and an involved stepmother and a loving wife all at once. It just required better planning and letting go of the need to control everything. Nolan supported her through tough board meetings and celebrated her victories. He reminded her to breathe when she got stressed and held her when she cried about the impossible balance of it all. He never once made her feel like she was too much or not enough, just exactly right. Maya thrived with two parents who adored her and each other. She continued her dinosaur obsession, added a space phase, and announced she wanted to be the first paleontologist astronaut president. Tessa had no doubt she'd manage it. One night, a year after the rooftop proposal, Tessa found herself on the couch with Maya, sleeping against her shoulder, while Nolan dozed on her other side. The TV was playing some documentary about the Jurassic period that Maya had insisted on watching for the 100th time. This was her life now. Not perfect, not always easy, but real and full and more satisfying than any business deal she'd ever closed. She'd thought success meant sacrifice, but she'd been wrong. Success meant having the courage to build a life that fed your soul instead of just your bank account. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Without even looking at it, she silenced her phone and set it aside. Whatever it was could wait until morning. Right now, she had everything she needed right here in her living room. Nolan stirred, opening one eye to look at her. "You ignored a work email. I'm so proud." "Shut up and go back to sleep." "Make me?" She kissed him, soft and sweet, trying not to wake Maya. When they broke apart, he was smiling that smile that still made her heart race. "Love you, Mrs. Harris." "Love you too." She settled back against him, feeling the weight of her daughter, warm and safe against her chest. "Love you both so much." As she drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the family she'd found when she finally stopped looking in boardrooms for fulfillment, Tessa Monroe Harris felt something she'd never expected to feel. Complete. The kind of complete that came from having work she was passionate about and people she loved coming home to. The kind of complete that came from being seen, really seen, and loved anyway. The kind of complete that came from finally understanding that having it all didn't mean doing everything yourself, but building a life with people who supported you while you did your part. She'd started this journey staring at a building manager in fitted work pants, unable to look away. She'd ended it with a husband who made her laugh, a daughter who made her brave, and a life that finally felt like it fit. And every time Nolan caught her staring at him, which was still often, he'd smile that wicked smile and say the same thing he'd said that first night in his apartment. "See something you like, beautiful?" And every time, without fail, she'd answer the same way. "Everything. I see everything." Because she did. She saw the life she'd built, the love she'd found, the woman she'd become when she finally stopped being afraid of being soft. She saw the future stretching ahead of them, full of challenges and triumphs, dinosaur facts and late-night work sessions, family dinners and stolen moments of passion. She saw it all, and it was more than she'd ever dreamed possible. And every night when she came home from work to find Nolan cooking dinner while Maya did homework at the kitchen table, Tessa would pause in the doorway and just look at them, her family, her home, her everything. She'd think about that day in the conference room when he'd caught her staring, when he'd called her out for wanting him, when everything had changed, about the electric moment when he'd commanded her to touch him, and she'd obeyed without hesitation. About how that surrender had felt like the truest freedom she'd ever known. "Best decision I ever made," she'd whisper. And Nolan would look up and smile, that same smile that had undone her from the very beginning. "Second best?" he'd correct. "First was saying yes when I proposed you marry me." "I proposed to you!" "Semantics." They'd laugh while Maya rolled her eyes and muttered about embarrassing parents, and the life they'd built together would continue in all its messy, beautiful glory. Proof that sometimes the most professional thing you could do was admit you were human, and the bravest thing you could do was let yourself be soft and love.